Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Momentum with Mo. My name is Moyo Mamora, and on this podcast, I like to share ideas with you on spirituality, on wealth creation, and on purpose. Today, I'd like to reflect on a text that from the Bible that is very famous. It's very common. A lot of us have probably heard it. It's in Joshua chapter 1, verse 8. And I'd like to read it, and I'll be reading from the NIV. So it says, keep this book of the law always on your lips, meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. And today, of course, the topic is about success, and think about this as ancient wisdom for success and just some reflection. So the context here is this, is that Joshua, who is taking the reins of leadership from Moses, who was one of the greatest leaders at that point in time in the nation, he was stepping in some pretty big shoes and about to cross into the inheritance that God had promised them. And God is encouraging him. Of course, he's a little bit nervous, I can imagine. And so God is giving this pep talk to him about how he needs to be strong-hearted, how he needs to be courageous, that the commission that was given to Moses is also committed unto his hands. And the same way God looked after Moses, backed up Moses and protected him, that, God was also going to be having his back similarly in the same situation. And when God is giving him instructions on how he'd be successful, the instruction is what that text is, right? So in addition to him being strong and being courageous, it's that text where he says, this book of the law would not depart from your mouth, meditate in it day and night, and be careful to do everything that is written in it. And it says, then you will make your way prosperous, and then also you will also have good success. So now let's break that down. So think about that inheritance as your goal, right? So if you think about what success means, it's the degree to which you are able to achieve a goal or your progress towards a goal that has been set. So if there is a goal for your life, if there's a goal, if there's something that you're working towards and something that you're working on, it doesn't start out with tactics and strategy, which I thought was very interesting, right? So in addition to you having the strength and the courage to actually pursue after what it is that is your goal, ultimately to get you to be successful in that particular area, it starts out, first of all, with the book of the law. Now, let's translate that. Anytime we hear in our modern conception, we hear law, what we think about is like a legislative law code that is supposed to help with organizing society. So you follow the rules, and as long as you stay within the rules, you're good. But if you break the rules, then you're out of line, and then there's some, punishment or some penalty for breaking the laws. But in the ancient Near Eastern thought, laws did not necessarily mean that. Laws represented wisdom, serving the same purpose about how you would maintain order in society, but very different in this context, right? As it being legislation. It's now the proper interpretation here is instruction. And in this particular context, when God is speaking to Joshua and giving him this instruction and this pep talk, it's really speaking about the wisdom of God, right? It's the revealed wise order of God, right? And what God is telling him is that that's what should not depart from your mouth. So it starts out with this concept, right, of success really starting out from the wisdom of God. So think about your goal, think about your pursuit, right? You have a plan, you have tactics, you have strategies, and so on and so forth. But all of that has to rest firmly on the notion or on the wisdom of God. And if you think about what the laws represented in this particular context, it was the 10 commandments that had been given to Moses, and then pursuant to that or following that, there had been about 600 or so additional laws that were introduced. And then there's a story that's been told in the New Testament about a scholar of the law who approaches Jesus and asks Jesus, say, hey, master, of all the laws that were given to Moses, which is the most important? And I like the way Jesus responded in that particular context. Jesus said, the first is this: you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And it says the second is just like it: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. So Jesus draws on two different laws and says that, you know what? It says on these two things is what the entire law and prophet hangs on. So in essence, what Jesus is saying here is the ethical thrust behind all the commandments, or all the instructions, I should say, that were given to the people is love. One, love for God, which affects how we respond to him, and love for others, which is how we treat one another. So as you think about what success is and you're meditating, right? So you're trying to tap into the mind of God. You're trying to tap into bodies of knowledge that exist, right? Whether that's people's past experiences, additional resources that are out there, or the Bible itself, or through prayer, and so on and so forth. The key here is this, is that you are trying to filter all these ideas through, you're filtering all these ideas on these two balances, which is, does it reflect love for God, number one, or number two, does it reflect love for humanity? And that's the basis by which you're making the decisions that you're making. So that's how you're shaping your strategy. You're shaping your execution tactics, right? As it relates to how you pursue that goal such that you can be successful. The other thing that I think is important here as we think about that story and that charge that was given to Joshua in this particular context for him to be successful is that meditation is the process of ruminating on something. You read something, you mutter it, and you're ultimately shaping your internal state. You're shaping your soul, you're shaping your spirit, you're digging something deep on the inside of you. And I think that that's something else that's pretty important as it relates to you being able to pursue your goal and be successful in life. It's this thought and it's this idea here that as you are in pursuit of what it is that you want to attain, you have to shape your heart, because your success actually comes from the inside. There is a proverb that says that you should guard your heart because out of it flows the issues of life. And that's very vital. That's very important, right? Because your success starts from within. It emanates from the inside of you. So you first become a successful person on the inside before you become a successful person on the outside. And that's something that we ought to all be thinking about, is that if I'm not successful on the inside, it's very likely that I will not be successful on the outside. So what does that mean for you is that as you meditate, you have to keep success on your mind. You have to keep possibility on your mind and on your heart. And that's what's calibrating you on the inside. There's another story that's being told in the New Testament. So Jesus is teaching in Luke chapter 8, and he says something. This is the parable of the sower. He says a sower goes and sows the word. And then in verse 11 of that parable, he says that this is the explanation of that parable, right? So sower sows the word, some fell on stony ground. It says some fell by the wayside, some fell amongst thorns, and some fell on good soil. And he then says this is the explanation. It says the seed is the word of God. The word of God is an idea. Think about this. It's a container, right, that represents God's intent and God's purposes, right? So, but here's where I'm really going with this thought here. When that seed, which is the instruction, the wisdom, the idea, the intent, the purpose of God for your life and for that particular situation, when it sets on your heart, you want it to really, really find placement on the inside of you. And one of the ways you can have it find placement on the inside of you is through this process of meditation, of repetition, on mulling over it, on speaking it, on affirming this truth, on the different areas of success for your own particular life. Another one is in Matthew chapter 12, where Jesus is talking about a tree. He says that only a good tree can produce good fruit, right? And says a bad tree will produce bad fruits. That you understand what's going on in a tree by looking at its fruits. And then he goes on to say, out of the abundance of the heart, it says, is what the mouth speaks, right? So this is powerful. You can shape your internal state with words of success, with ideas of success, with revelation of success that comes from the mind of God, that comes from the instruction of God as it relates to your own particular situation. In practical terms, what does this mean? So I'll give you an example. When I was going to do one of my real estate deals many years ago, I shouldn't say many, a few years ago actually, I didn't necessarily have all the money available to do the deal. I had never done a deal that was that big in my life. But I knew that was a feat, right? But every time I thought about the opportunity initially, I'd have fear on the inside of me. So going back to that story of Joshua, I'd be so nervous, right? I knew it was a deal that I wanted to do, but I'd be so nervous. I'd be so scared. I'm like, man, what if it fails? What if it doesn't happen? Where do I get the money from? Like, what if I put down the earnest money? Because again, it's a big deal. So it's a big earnest money fee that I'm putting down. It was about $50,000 in earnest money. And I'm saying to myself that, well, what if I'm not able to fulfill all the obligations of the contract? And what happens? But what I started to do is the first thing I said to myself that, I'd be strong and I'd be courageous, right? Because if this intent has found place in my heart and it's a goal, I'm thinking about it's like every place the sole of my foot treads upon, it has been given unto me as an inheritance. So I ought to be strong and I ought to be courageous. Very first thing that I did. And the second thing that I did, I started reaching into the mind of God in the place of prayer, reading different and soliciting perspective from different people who've done similar deals, who've taken risk like this. And then I started looking at scriptures that talk about people who had been successful because God had been with them or because God had supported them, whether that's by his favor or by his blessings, and so on and so forth. So I started spending time in texts like that. And what I started doing was to mutter those texts, read them, keep them in front of my eyes, and then started visualizing what it means to be successful on the basis of that text. So whether it's something that's talking about favor, I'm thinking about favor with the lenders, I'm thinking about favor with the brokers, with the sellers, and so on and so forth. Or I'm thinking about resources. I'm thinking about the fact that it is God who controls the resources of the world and he's able to direct them towards me. I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about my ability to assess risk. And I'm meditating on this. And the more I started doing it, the confidence started increasing on the inside of me. I then began to see possibility. And I was like, you know what? I can actually do this deal. Now, of course, the fear would still be there, but I stayed on it, meditating on that, forming that picture, calibrating my internal state, trying to push away that fear, dispel that fear. And what it did for me was I started having the quote unquote motivation to take action. I started saying to myself, you know what, I can actually see possibility here. So therefore, I'm willing to take the first step to try to attain to that goal of buying this particular multifamily asset. Now, the other thing that we see in this text, it says that it shall not depart from your mouth. From your mouth. Now, what does that mean? Words, think about words as containers. They represent intent and purposes of one's mind and one's heart. So when I speak a word to you, I am releasing based off of ideas in my head and ideas in my heart. And I'm putting that out into the world. Now, so if you think about everything we've been talking about here as it relates to success, I'm downloading the intent, the purposes of God. I'm seeking and reaching into the mind of God concerning that particular goal, right? I want to understand, and I'm weighing this on the balance of whether it represents love for God and love for people, right? And as I'm filtering this and formulating my ideas, formulating my tactics, formulating my strategy, I'm also calibrating my heart as well. Now, the next thing that I want to do is I want to align my own speaking with everything that I've done so far. You see, because one of the things that happens as it relates to success is I think a lot of people think success is a good idea. So some people like something, they like a goal, but I don't think a lot of people have necessarily said to themselves that that's for me, that's a goal that I can actually pursue. And again, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth would speak. So when you release words, you're releasing purpose, you're releasing intent. So not only do I understand that this is for me, and I've reached into the mind of God and I understand that this is for me, I'm actually releasing that intent and saying, I align with that by speaking words. In Hebrews chapter 11, it says that by faith, through the word of God, the world was framed. So the things that we see were made from things which we do not see. So the word was able to frame the world. So therefore, the words that I speak can frame my experiences in life as well. If you are going to be successful, you need to understand how to speak like a successful person. You need to be able to speak possibility. If you talk lack, if you talk fear, if you talk scarcity, if you talk failure, then that's what's going to be your experience as well. Now, there are a lot of people who know how to code switch, meaning, if you're in a Christian setting, they might tell you like, hey, I'm working towards something, praise God, bless the Lord, yada, yada, yada. And, they know how to speak the language to make it sound like we're good. But the truth here is this, that it's by the fruit of a tree you really understand what's going on, what the root is. So if I look at a tree, the only way I'm going to know if it's an orange tree or an apple tree is by looking at the types of fruit that are coming from the tree. An orange tree would produce oranges, an apple tree would produce apples, right? So even though someone might put a label on the tree and say this is an apple tree, the truth is if I look at the fruit that's coming out of that, it'd be oranges, and then I know for sure it's an orange tree. It's not enough for you to just code switch and just, change and talk the talk and do all of that stuff. You actually have to believe it. And that's why meditation is also important. So you're meditating, you're speaking consistent with what's happening on the inside of you. And that's shaping the world. That's framing your perspective. That's framing and shaping your experiences for success as well. It says, be faithful to do everything that is in it. Now, what I find really fascinating here is it didn't start out with doing, which is what I said. It started out with all these other processes, this cycle, the cycle of meditation, the cycle of speaking, right? And then you take action, right? So once I have understood and weighed and refined and just filtered my ideas through the mind of God and through the balance of God, which is, the ethic of love for God and love for other people, which represents the instruction and the wisdom, right, for that particular situation, right? For me to be successful in that particular situation, I'm also calibrating my insight for success as well, based off of that. And then I'm affirming what it is that I intend to do. I'm saying that now I understand the intent of God. Now I understand the purpose of God as it relates to this particular situation. I have my plans, I have my strategy, and I've refined all of that. But now I want to affirm that with my own words so I can shape my own experience. I can create pathways, right? That lead me to this path of success. I am releasing words into the universe that pull the resources that would cause me to be successful in what it is that I'm doing. Then the next thing is I want to take action. It says, be careful to do everything that is in it. Now, let me say this to you. There's a proverb that says that when you commit your works unto the Lord, Proverbs 16:3, it says, he would cause your thoughts to be agreeable with his, and then your plans will succeed. And I believe that that's what it's all about, is that when I go through this process, what then happens is my tactics, my strategy, my thinking, my ideas then begin to conform with how God would make it such that I will be successful in that particular situation. I firmly believe that. And I believe that as you begin to release words and speak words of success about what it is that you want to attain to and what it is that you want to achieve, what then begins to happen here is that, the right people, the right relationship, the right resources, the right perspective, all those things then start coming together. And that's going back to that example about that investment property that I was about to make. That's exactly what happened. All of a sudden, I'd get an idea. Why don't you call this person? I call that person. This person gives me some perspective, gives me some ideas. I pick up the phone. I call the broker. I'm like, hey, I'm really interested in this asset. We start negotiating. I start getting thoughts on how to negotiate specifically about that particular deal. I get a referral to an attorney. I get a referral to the right lending person. And then I start finding people who are like, hey, you know what? I'd be interested in going in with you on this particular deal. And I'm like, yeah, sure. And that's exactly what happened. And boom, 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 boom. All of a sudden, the right contractor, everything happens. And that deal comes together perfectly. But you know what? It wasn't just meditation about calibrating my insight. It wasn't just the speaking of the words on the outside. It wasn't just tapping into the mind of God. Once all of that happens, action then became important, right? Because in that process of taking action, character is being formed. Because when I got that deal done, when I got to that milestone of success, the next time I saw an investment that was similar to that, it was so easy, it was a no-brainer. I was able to do it just like that. And that's what happens with you as well. It builds character, right? There's a foundation in there. You're building character for yourself. You're building a possibility mindset. You're able to see how you can actually get things done, right? Once you make that first step and get over the hump of that very first mountain, such that you are then successful in your endeavors. Anyways, I hope this has been helpful for you. If this has been a blessing to you, I would encourage you to like and to subscribe on this channel, and definitely share this with people who you think would find this useful. God bless you, and see you again next time.